Move on to some new topics very shortly. Senator Wong.
I did have some further information for Senator O'Sullivan, which I think he may or may not be aware of. I understand that Senator O'Sullivan's office sent the email to Mr Albanese at Mr Albanese's parliamentary address, so the aalbanese.mp@aph.gov.au. That email account is closed. I understand from the Prime Minister's office that there should have been and still has an automatic response advising that this account is closed and providing the link to write to the Prime Minister because until today the advice I have is neither the Department nor the PMO have a copy of the letter you've tabled. So, but I can take on notice of response.
I have checked my system and there is no automatic response. There is no automatic response. But in any case...
I'm not sure that's right, so we're just going to have to disagree on that.
I've just checked and there is no automatic response. But in any case, these were matters that were quite widely discussed in the media at the time. It would have been, I'm sure, brought to the Prime Minister's attention, given the seriousness of it. Can you confirm whether or not it was brought to the Prime Minister's attention?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator. I mean, I know that... I appreciate this.
Putting aside the letter, there was national reporting on this matter.
Well, Senator, there's national reporting on many issues, with respect.
On one of his MPs?
Well,
I mean, surely
Senator,
that would... days after the firebombing of a synagogue?
Well, I suspect that the more important issue was the response to what occurred at the synagogue. But I will take on notice the response to your letter.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
The email address, as I understand it, comes up on the APH system. Now, I understand it's not BNC, but has there been any action taken by the PM to have that removed from the APH system?
Sure.
Given that it's no longer... It's a simple process question. Now that, because if another MP goes to the APH system and types in Albanese and that comes up,
and the message that we got when we just checked it now is that the advice, a response message which says this email is now.
Yeah, okay. No,
okay, so that's why I said I don't agree with Senator O'Sullivan, but we're just going to have to disagree on that point. But
okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Cash.
Senator McGrath. Thank you. I'd like to ask about the teal party at the lodge. Someone able to come up and assist with that, please? But while they're coming to the table, Minister, when did the Prime Minister send out invitations for the party at the lodge for the teals?
I wasn't part of setting an invitation, so I don't know, but I can take that on notice and try and find out.
Can anyone answer the question as to when the invitations were sent out?
Senator Arthur Spiro, First Assistant Secretary, Ministerial Support Division. It's my team that assisted with that particular function. I can come back to you very shortly in terms of the timing of the sending of those invitations, if that's helpful.
Very shortly, while I'm asking the following questions would be great. So if your team could send you the answers.
I don't think Senator Birmingham ever got back to me during a hearing in many years.
Senator Birmingham, I'm sure, was very helpful towards you, Senator Wong.
Very helpful and very polite, but he never got back.
But my question is to when were the invitations sent out? I mean, the event was only a couple of weeks ago, so we're not asking about an event that was...
He said he'll take that on notice and come back to you.
Well,
he said he would actually try and find it.
I think the answer was you'll try and get the answers pretty quickly. I don't want a verbal view.
We'll get them as quickly as we can, Senator.
So, how were the invitations being sent out? By email or paper or...?
I'll check on that, Senator.
What's the usual process for people invited to the lodge or Kirrilly House? Is it a paper invite, an email invite? Is there a process for sending invitations?
It depends on whether it's a formal or an informal event. whether it's a personal event, it can be just by word of mouth, it can be just by an email, it can be with a printed card, Senator.
Okay. So there was no printed card for this particular event?
I don't believe there was a card, but again, I'd have to check it.
Okay.
Given it was ultimately, Senator, this was a small gathering, and it would have been an invitation that was given, as you said, within the 2 weeks prior. I've got to check what the actual method of...
Well, that's what I'm hoping someone can assist you while I'm asking these questions, because the event was only a couple of weeks ago, and there should be some fresh knowledge of this particular event. Who decided which crossbenchers to invite?
In terms of the general principles around the use of Kirribilli and/or the lodge, there's capacity for the Prime Minister of the day to invite a small group of parliamentarians or a range of other people, and for that to operate within the usual sort of parameters of the management of the household. So Mr Spiro has already taken on notice the question, but I would presume that the decision about who would come to the lodge will be a matter for the Prime Minister, but we'll check that and make sure.
Minister, will the Prime Minister be extending a similar invitation to Senate crossbenchers?
I know the Prime Minister engaged quite a lot with the Senate crossbench, particularly in getting agreement to the passage of so much legislation at the end of last year.
Can you want to say thank you?
I'll pass on your views about that. I mean, these are matters for the Prime Minister.
Who actually attended this particular event? The teal party at the lodge.
I don't have a guest list, Senator. I can take that on notice if it's helpful.
Okay.
What? I know I think Ms Sharkey was a former member of your party. I'm not sure it's reasonable to use I know that it's a nice grabby title, Senator, but I don't think that's a reasonable moniker, M-O-N-I-K-E-R.
So what about the costs in relation to the event? What was the cost of the event?
So, Senator, what Mr Hare was saying before is that there's a set of guidelines in terms of the use of the official residences in relation to various events. And there are various categories of events. There is essentially a set of events which are so small, which don't actually feature as being an additional budget line, and I suspect this is one of those events.
So you're saying that the Prime Minister got out the sayos with tomato and cheese and some sarsaparilla, but this was quite a public event though. You're saying there'll be no formal catering for this event?
I'm saying I'm not aware of there being any formal catering for this event, but that wouldn't have been an unusual thing, because small gatherings, whether they be of an official nature or of a private nature, are not something that we retain a record of ordinarily.
How many events are held at the lodge each? Because it is a private residence, but also a public residence in regard to how many events have been held there in the last 6 months?
Senator, I can take on notice how many have been at the lodge for the last 6 months for that period of time. If it's helpful in the broad, across both the official residences and the official establishments, there have been 96 official functions overall that my team has organised or others have organised. That doesn't mean that all of them were in fact hosted by the Prime Minister. The majority would have been hosted by the Prime Minister.
So just clarifying, so the 96, that's from the date of...
That's since the commencement of the 47th Parliament,
so
May 2022.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Senator. This is we've answered this one on notice on a number of occasions. We can certainly seek to get an update from the last session, from the last quon that was provided on this one.
So you don't have this information to hand?
6 months.
It's a pretty regular question that gets asked at these estimates.
I'm not sure if I've got it on hand, Senator. I can check.
I don't think we've got it cut along the 6 months lines, Mr. Hand.
So going back to the event with the teals and the crossbenches, and I hope the information I've asked previously is coming along, but can I get an itemised list of what food was served and also what beverages were served, including the names and the vintages of any wines or champagnes?
Senator, I'm not sure that we'll have that information. We can certainly seek to find it out. As Mr Spiro said earlier, if it's a small event, it'll often be undertaken within the normal sort of arrangements within the household. So I'm not sure if a menu was developed for it as opposed to the food just being prepared, but we can check.
If you could, and if there were any catering services, notwithstanding the size of the event and your previous answer, that were specifically procured for the purpose of the event, you know, what catering services were brought online, and in particular was, you know, waiters, kitchen hands, or cleaning staff?
We can take that.
Was there any audio-visual equipment or any services such as that used for the event?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator, but I can check.
Were any photographs taken at the event?
We didn't have a departmental photographer that I'm aware of, Senator. Whether photographs were taken by House staff or by whether there were any of the Prime Minister's staff there, I couldn't tell you.
Minister, did you attend the event?
No.
Were you invited to attend the
I
event?
think we were sitting.
Yes, we were.
I take my responsibilities to the Senate quite
But
seriously.
you have a permanent hearing.
Yeah, but how often do I just disappear, Senator? You've always got to keep eyes on. You never know what McGrath will be up to, I say.
I'm not the only one to say that, by the way. But do we have any answers yet, sir, in relation to the questions I asked earlier?
He's not going.
Well, there is a
he's not going to have an answer now, and even if he does, I'd like to look at it before he gives it to you, so you can wait till the break, Senator. That's not unreasonable.
You'll get an answer. We'll get an answer today, though.
No, well, he's not giving that commitment either, and Senator Birmingham never allowed officials to give such a commitment. Well, best endeavours.
Thank you, Senator Wong. You did promise to be part of the most transparent government ever, and I would hope that you live up to that pledge in relation to what funds were expended on behalf of the taxpayers
We have no
for a party
secret
at the Lodge.
ministries, that is true. The Prime Minister is not sworn to any other ministry.
I don't think that's particularly relevant to the catering services that are provided at the Lodge while he's trying to be nice to the Teals. So I'm okay with those questions, and I look forward to the answers that come back soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cash.
Thank you. If I could just ask some questions now in relation to the Minister for Defence revealed through media that on Tuesday the 11th of February a Royal Australian Air Force P-8A Poseidon aircraft had been intercepted over the South China Sea by a People's Liberation Army Air Force J-16 fighter, which fired flares just 30 metres from the P-8, and also that Defence was tracking a task group of People's Liberation Army Navy warships through the Coral Sea. So my first question is, When did the department first become aware of the P8 incident?
Hi, Senator Pablo Kung, First Assistant Secretary, International Division. So in relation to the P8 incident over the Paracel Islands, the department first became aware on the morning of Wednesday, the 12th of February, Senator.
Wednesday, 12th of February. Thank you very much. When was the Prime Minister first briefed?
Senator, I can't advise you when the Prime Minister was first briefed. I can advise you on when we first briefed the Prime Minister's office.
Thank you very much.
And it was that same morning, shortly after we were notified by the Department of Defence.
Right, same morning. Minister Wong, are you aware of when the Prime Minister was first briefed in relation to the P8 incident?
I'll have to take that on notice. But can I just correct something you said? But you said, I think, that this became public by way of media. A statement, public statement was issued, not just the Deputy Prime Minister's interview, but a public statement was issued in relation.
No, sorry, I said it was revealed in the media.
Yeah. No, but it was. I mean, obviously, decision was made to make sure this was appropriately disclosed. I would say, Senator, and I appreciate you can ask questions about this, but these are matters in terms of timelines and so forth for defence.
No, I understand that, but the last time I checked, I'm in Prime Minister and Cabinet, am I? Am I not asking questions about the Prime Minister? Is that correct?
I'm making the point, I was trying to be helpful, Senator, that if you want information about the timelines and events associated with the P8 incident to which you referred, that is appropriately addressed tomorrow or Wednesday in defence estimates.
But I'm asking questions about the Prime Minister's knowledge. So I'm assuming that they are relevant here.
You've asked them all day, Senator. So go ahead.
Well,
I was actually trying to be helpful, but go ahead.
Did the Prime Minister receive advice from any other departments or agencies in relation to the P8 incident?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice, Senator. I mean, often as a general principle, we provide advice to the Prime Minister's office on incidents in relation to either international issues or national security, and quite often the Prime Minister or his office will receive separate advice from operational agencies.
Okay. Minister, are you aware if the Prime Minister received advice from other departments or agencies in relation to the P8 incident?
So what are you trying... I don't quite understand what you're trying to ask, Senator.
Well, the first question was when did the department first become aware? I now understand that that is Wednesday the 12th of February. My question then was, when was the Prime Minister briefed? My understanding is his office was briefed the same morning. I'm then asking, did he receive advice from any other departments or agencies in relation to this issue?
I would have to take that on notice. I can say to you it would be normal practice for these sorts of issues to be discussed at senior levels of the government.
Did the Prime Minister direct any instructions on the type of response the Australian government would make?
Senator, no, I'm not aware of any specific direction from the Prime Minister. Obviously, there was an initial assessment which was primarily a responsibility of the Department of Defence to assess the interaction, the nature of it, whether it was safe, professional or otherwise. And then following that assessment, there would have been some discussion in terms of what the government's response would be.
So, Senator, this is partly why I suggested this might be issues for defence. So, can I answer in the broad? So this is in relation to the P8, yes?
Yes,
Yeah,
my
okay,
question is in relation to
the P8.
the Prime Minister.
Yeah, no, but I'm just... the usual process would be that defence would go through an assessment of what occurred to provide advice about how they would describe or categorise the incident, and that would form the basis of the public, or any decision to make public what has occurred in accordance with defence advice, and that is what occurred on this occasion.
Okay, that wasn't my question. My question was...
It's relevant to your question, because this is that there is a clear principle and a clear set of protocols. That is, we respond based on defence advice, and we respond in a way that is consistent with practice.
So that's what you're saying then? You responded in accordance with the protocols?
Well, there are,
Senator, it is well understood among senior levels of the government how we respond to such incidents in relation to China.
Yes, I understand that. So my question was a very simple one.
This is not the Prime Minister directing.
I know that.
So you're asking, with respect, you're asking the wrong question. That there is a methodical, clear process that has gone through. As Mr Fletcher said, it's well known within government how we deal with these matters, and the matter was dealt with in the way that I've outlined.
Did the Prime Minister make representations to counterparts in the Chinese government?
No, Senator, there have been no. There's been no recent contact directly between the Prime Minister and his counterparts in China.
Thank you. Who made the decision in government that the incident would not be made public until the 13th of February?
I don't think that's an accurate reflection of the time frame.
Oh, well, could you take me through the time frame?
Well, again, you should ask these questions in defence, because they are the ones responsible for it. But the abiding principle is that there is a response that is consistent with practice and is based on defence advice. Defence will often take some time to make an assessment of how they will characterise an incident, and they have very clear categories. Is that how you describe it? Categories about how they would describe various interactions. And you would recall from many incidents that often it takes a period of time for defence to be clear about its assessment of how they would describe a particular incident.
Just in terms of the Chinese warships, when did the department first become aware of the task group's presence in Australia's exclusive economic zone?
No, they're not in.
Senator, Defence is best placed to answer that question, and it relates to operational security matters about our monitoring of our northern approaches. So this is not a question we can answer.
I'll continue to ask my questions, and it might be that I do have to take them to defence. When was the... Please, Senator Wong, you clearly have something to say that's not reflected by merely shaking your head and rolling your eyes at me on the Hansard record.
I'm sorry, I wasn't intending to roll my eyes. Mr Fletcher has just given you some indication about the area of concern in terms of public disclosure. I'm not sure you've actually asked for a briefing on this. And if so, we would take you through that.
As I said, I will ask the questions, because obviously we will also be asking them in defence. And if you are unable to answer them, or you would prefer that they go to defence, then that's all you need to say.
Or we won't be answering them in a public forum.
That's fine, yeah. Exactly. Then that becomes, for the Hansard record, what the answer to the questions are. When was the Prime Minister first made aware that the task group had formed and were travelling south along Australia's coast?
Senator, I'll take that on notice, but I'll refer to my previous answer.
Thank you. How regularly was the Prime Minister updated?
I'll take that on notice as well.
Thank you. Did the Prime Minister make representations to counterparts in the Chinese government?
My previous answer said there has been no recent contact between the Prime Minister and his counterparts, including on this matter.
Yep, okay. Thank you for that. When was the Prime Minister made aware of the live firing exercise?
Again, Senator, I can't speak to when the Prime Minister was first made aware of the exercise, but we did brief the Prime Minister's office on the early afternoon of Friday the 21st of February.
Friday the 21st of February in the early afternoon.
That's right, Senator.
Okay. And what coordination was there with the New Zealand government?
Senator, I think that's more a question for the Department of Defence. As far as this department was concerned, the only contact with the Government of New Zealand occurred after the incidents in question.
Thank you. Chair, Senator McGrath has some questions on a separate...
Thank you. I'll rotate the call. I understand Senator Sheldon's also got some questions now that he's been waiting to ask. So we'll come back to Senator McGrath. Senator Sheldon.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask some questions regarding some aviation questions on the high level regards Rex Airlines. Thanks very much. Just some of this, obviously the critical that we're ensuring regional communities are receiving services, and you don't have to be an ex-aviation wonk, which I was in my previous life, and still take an interest. But of course, the critical role that Rex does play in air services, particularly in regional areas. Everything from health services to, of course, supporting tourism industries and local economies, let alone social connectivity, which again is critically important. I noted that the Western Queensland Alliance of Councils said that Rex plays a quite critical role in ensuring access to health services and supporting health workers reaching us. And they went on to talk more about the critical role that Rex plays in the community. Can you advise us what steps the government's taken since being notified that Rex entered administration, and if you could step me through that?
Yeah, very happy to step you through that, Senator. Before I start, though, I would just note that the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Communications and the Arts is, of course, working closely with the administrators and can answer more detailed questions should you have them. But that department is working very closely with the administrators to ensure people in regional communities continue to have access to aviation services. The government is supporting this process by committing to work with shortlisted bidders on potential government support to maximise the prospect of a successful sale of the airline, and undertaking necessary work on contingency options. There's a range of other sort of supports that are being provided, which maybe Ms. Garvin would like to run us through.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Christina Garvin, Assistant Secretary, Infrastructure, Energy and Regional Branch. Some of the other steps that the government has undertaken to support Rex includes, as Ms Williams set out, the terms of government support. They will be subject to negotiation, but will be conditional on commitments by bidders to provide that ongoing reasonable level of service to regional communities and remote communities. and the need to provide value for money for taxpayers and including good governance as well. Government is also committed to ensure access to regional flight slots at Sydney Airport until 24th of October 2026. The government has also acquired $50 million of debt to become Rex's largest secured creditor, so they can continue to, through the administration process until the middle of this year, to go through the second sale process, and provided $80 million in doing so. And when Rex went into administration, the government quickly took provide a guarantee in relation to regional ticket sales during the voluntary administration period.
I just want to, the question on the administration as well, going to the workforce. Obviously, critical role is to make sure the workforce is intact, to keep the airline in the air. A degree of certainty to make sure that the likelihood of people coming to an airline that's in trouble is very unlikely. When you lose somebody, you lose somebody. So this is support that's been occurring. I understood that in July 24 that more than 600 was announced by the administrators, by Rex, that 600 jobs would be lost, and in August 2024 that more than 70 jobs would be lost, which would be devastating, of course, for their families and regional jobs across the country. Can you step me through how the government's assisted those Rex employees as well that have lost their jobs, but also as a result of the administration, and how that's the assurances we're giving now within the airline, how that's assisting maintaining the workforce there?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I can take you through those steps. So the government has announced commitments for former employees of the Rex Airlines, and that they would have early access to the Fair Entitlements Guarantee, or the FEG. So early access to the FEG scheme will ensure those former employees access to their entitlements, such as unpaid wages and annual leave, and that is not delayed by the voluntary administration extension, the period extension. So, for example, as of late January, the Department of Employment Workplace Relations has received about 306 claims and processed 302 claims for former Rex employees, with over $7.1 million already paid for Rex staff during, through the FEG. And entitlements of former employees of regional businesses who have been made redundant during administration will also be paid by Rex administrators and main secured creditors during this time.
Well, I just might go just to this question. Obviously, it's important that these jobs and livelihoods maintained to keep the airline and regional Australians receiving the support that Rex gives in critical. It's the arteries of large parts of regional Australia provided by Rex's service. Now, the working with the administrators to find a private buyer and plan for a Commonwealth acquisition if one is not found. The opposition's taking out, it's been saying this is what they're saying, that this is what the plan is. It's sort of talking up one way. They're saying this is my commentary, but one hand there's criticism about the government intervention, and on the other hand, I note that while Susan Ley is criticising the fact that Deputy Opposition Leader is criticising the moves to actually help the airline, but on the other side, the Nationals, David Littleproud and Michael McCormick have said that everything should be done to save the airline. Nothing should be left off the table. Just the question is that to the department, and then maybe the minister, if she would like, what does aviation play in regional communities, and why is it so important to safeguard its future?
Yes, Senator, I guess one of the examples we can provide is that Rex, particularly the Rex Airlines, flies into quite a number of airports where it is the only sole provider of these services, those services that you mentioned earlier in terms of healthcare, education and other access to services. So, for example, some of the regulated routes to Albany, to Carnarvon, to Normanton. So there is a range of airports where Rex is the only provider of these services to those regional and remote communities.
Senator, that is the case. and it's quite striking where if you look down the electorates and states for airports where Rex is the only provider of passenger services, and you'll see in WA, New South Wales, South Australia, Queensland. So there are quite a number of airports and communities where Rex is the only provider of passenger service. I also would say from personal experience, I know that the Broken Hill Rex is the way in which residents of Broken Hill access specialist medical appointments, often on fly-in, fly-out from Adelaide, obviously, sometimes Sydney, depending on the issue. So, and of course, across northern Queensland, Longreach, Mount Isa, Cairns, Mornington, Rex is critical for specialist medical services. So in addition to those airports where that have been mentioned, including Birdsville, Mornington, St George and others, we also know that Rex is the way in which medical services in some of these committees are provided, urgent medical services.
I think I have no further questions.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you. There were some questions in relation to Ukraine. And I do note, Minister, your opening statement, and also that today is the 3rd anniversary of the invasion of Ukraine. What are Ukraine's priority needs?
Hi, Senator. So, obviously, Ukraine has a range of priority needs which the government has been committed to addressing, principally, I think, military equipment and assistance, also a range of humanitarian needs and some needs in relation to energy assistance, all of which the government has been providing.
So there is a list?
Well, there's no specific list. There are requests that Ukraine will issue to us and other like-minded countries, and we endeavour to consider those requests and respond as appropriate.
When I visited Ukraine, I mean, this is probably a question for Foreign Affairs more, but obviously I expressed to my counterpart it was useful for us to have clarity about what their top priorities were, so that they could inform how we responded, and so we've sought to ensure that that's the case. Obviously, there are different. There's a lot of media around different requests, etc. But to be really clear, have a clear understanding from the Ukrainians what they regard as their priorities. But obviously, at the moment, the big issue is the next steps in terms of peace negotiations.
So, in terms of the requests that come in, do you keep a list of the requests? Because you mentioned, before military, humanitarian, and energy. Is there a central list though somewhere that PMC have keep?
So, Senator, the department's role is to oversee and coordinate whole-of-government efforts to ensure that support that we do provide to Ukraine is both timely and well-calibrated. So we do take into account, obviously, requests as they come in, but as you would appreciate, most of those requests are then the subject of consideration by the relevant line agency.
Okay, so I don't think you deliberately not answer the question, but the requests have come in. Do we keep a copy of those requests somewhere? Sorry, Minister.
I think it might be better. We can take that on notice. I suspect some of the communications about priorities would have occurred either to DFAT or Department of Defence.
Well,
so different portfolios.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask the questions here. Some I realise might have to go to other committee hearings. but I will continue. Can you then certainly take on notice what list of priorities that Prime Minister and Cabinet may have, if you are able to answer that particular question, noting the Minister's advice then. Minister,
what I can say to you is, on each occasion where we've made further decisions about assistance, you know, we have obviously been informed that that's been the subject of discussion and consultation with the Ukrainians.
Well, on notice, can you provide a list of what priority needs we have been supplied to the Ukrainian government? Minister, you mentioned when you were in Ukraine,
We can provide some of that information now, Senator, so we'll do that.
So, Senator, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the government's provided more than $1.5 billion in assistance that covers, as I mentioned before, defence, humanitarian assistance, economic assistance. Out of that $1.5 billion, around $1.3 billion has been provided in military assistance, $85 million in humanitarian assistance to meet the urgent needs of the Ukrainian people, $66 million to the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development to support Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery efforts, and about $63 million worth to support Ukraine's energy security.
Okay. The M1 tanks, part of our military support, have they been delivered yet?
This is a matter for defence.
Okay. Does Prime Minister and Cabinet know when they'll be delivered?
No, you can't. Senator. This is the Parliament, this is estimates. I take it, as I said, a very relaxed attitude around the boundaries. A lot of things get asked which, you know, might not technically be about, certainly we haven't had a single question about any budget matter or any money, but leave that aside. But this is the military assistance and the issue of tanks is a question for defence. It is not a question for PM&C.
When was the When was the last conversation the Prime Minister had with President Zelensky?
Senator, that was earlier this month.
What were the topics discussed in that conversation?
Well, Senator, we don't usually go into the full details of revealing conversations between leaders. I would note the Prime Minister did put out a social media message afterwards reinforcing our solidarity with the government and people of Ukraine, and President Zelensky also put out a similar message.
Did President Zelensky ask, in relation to the priority needs, when the M1 tanks were going to be delivered?
As I said, Senator, we don't usually go into the details of what was discussed unless they've already been revealed by the Prime Minister.
But Prime Minister and Cabinet is supposed to be coordinating the Ukraine support, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
So you would have knowledge, therefore, of when particular items of support are due to be delivered or have been delivered, that would be correct?
So, as the Minister has said, the detailed knowledge of logistics and timing resides with the particular agency, in this case, the Department of Defence.
So you're saying...
Dept can answer questions about the humanitarian funding and the military, which is my side of it or our side of it, and Defence can answer detailed questions about the defence assistance.
But Prime Minister and Cabinet is coordinating the support.
Senator, it's actually you just have to wait 2 days. It's about making sure that the answer is current and correct and given by the people, the officials who are charged with the responsibility of implementing the program. It's not, it's just how government works. The announcement the commitment has been made. Defence is responsible for some parts of the additional assistance. We are responsible in DFAT for humanitarian and also for sanctions, which were announced today. Of course, there's coordination. Of course, there's discussion. But Mr. Kang is not responsible for the delivery of the tanks.
So who is coordinating our support to Ukraine?
That wasn't your question.
Well, that's the question I'm asking
No,
now.
Senator.
I'm
Your
asking
question,
the question.
no, but I just want to be clear. Your question is not who is coordinating. Your question was a detailed question about the delivery of tanks, and I'm just saying that's a matter for defence.
And I'll come back to that.
Thank you.
But in relation to who is coordinating our support to Ukraine?
Senator, it's the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Okay. So, does the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet have any knowledge in relation to the support that is provided by the other government departments?
Yes.
So, my question therefore is, in relation to the M1 tanks that you would have knowledge of, what is the department's knowledge of when those tanks are going to be delivered?
That is a question for Defence, Senator.
Sorry?
That is a question for Defence.
So you have no knowledge, the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet has no knowledge of when the tanks are being delivered?
Look, Senator, I understand I think I understand the attempted political tactic here, which is, everything.
Let me
finish. Please let me finish.
Well, stop.
Please let me finish.
Inferring improper motives.
Senator,
Please, I'd like to finish my answer.
Please let the Minister finish.
Right, where everything is somehow in the PM's portfolio. But I just want to say again, Senator, yes, this department, as under you, has a coordinating role. But detailed questions about timelines, delivery, the reasons for those, for dates, it's the responsible department. I'm happy to answer questions on sanctions when I have foreign affairs officials and on the humanitarian assistance, because I and my department are responsible for that. The Department of Defence is responsible for the delivery and the provision of military assistance. It is not a conspiracy for us to say to you, can you please ask the responsible department those issues of detail? We just go around in circles.
So has Prime Minister and Cabinet in its coordinating meetings ever asked when the tanks are going to be delivered?
Senator, we cover off a range of issues to do with timeframes for delivery and provision of assistance to Ukraine.
So I'm going to repeat the question because I didn't understand that answer. So has Prime Minister and Cabinet in your coordinating meetings, because you are a coordinating department, have you ever asked when the tanks are going to be delivered?
Yes, Senator, we ask questions around delivery of humanitarian and military assistance, including in relation to the tanks, but the detailed timing is a matter of defence, for the Department of Defence.
But you would have documents that would list when the humanitarian aid's being delivered? You would have documents that would show when the military aid's being delivered?
Why don't you want to ask our departments, Senator? Like, I've tried to be helpful here. I've explained to you who is doing what. Why is it so... Why are you so intent on not asking our departments and you wanted to ask here when we've told you that they're the ones with responsibility for the programs?
The Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet is responsible for coordinating our support to Ukraine, and yet we can't get any answers out of the department in relation to timelines of what support has been delivered to Ukraine.
Senator, this is not, as I said, you keep acting like this is some sort of problem. I'm saying to you, we have, $1.5 billion worth of assistance in total. You have different programs delivering different parts of it, like, for example, humanitarian aid. There may be different parts of the humanitarian budget we've been using for different things we have been funding. we're simply saying the people who have the responsibility and the knowledge of timelines and why are not the ones at the table. I don't know why it's such an issue asking the appropriate department.
Well, I'm unsure why it's such an issue that the department is responsible for coordinating our support to Ukraine is unable to answer some very simple questions in relation to the timeframes concerning the delivery of the said support. This is taxpayers' money we're talking about here, and what value add does the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet bring to the delivery of support to Ukraine in that case?
Senator, we bring together the full range of agencies involved in assistance to Ukraine and make sure that everyone knows what's going on with each other. But the implementation, the timelines, the specificities of how and when the assistance is delivered is a matter for the agencies concerned.
Is this just more of a light touch approach, as a witness previously said today? Okay.
No, Senator, it's just that we actually think ministers are responsible for their portfolios. We don't have a Prime Minister who swears himself secretly to other portfolios. We have a Prime Minister who expects ministers to do our jobs, and that if I am part of an announcement on Ukraine, that I'm responsible with my department for the delivery of that assistance. So yes, we do have a system where the Prime Minister expects ministers to do their job.
And I'm asking Prime Minister and Cabinet if they can tell us any information in relation to the coordinating of the support for Ukraine. It is quite clear that I cannot get an answer from Prime Minister and Cabinet.
No, Senator, please stop saying things which are just not true. You have got an answer, it's just not the answer you want. And the answer is, if you want timelines on tanks, can you please ask that in Defence, because they'll be able to give you a much more correct and current answer on timelines on delivery on tanks. If you want if you want to answer a question on sanctions, I'm happy to answer that in DFAT estimates, and I'm also happy to answer questions on humanitarian assistance which we provide.
So in relation, you just said a current timeline in relation to delivery of tanks. How often does the Department of Defence update Prime Minister and Cabinet in relation to the delivery of the tanks?
Well, Senator, we have a process where we get together with relevant agencies on a regular basis to discuss current and future assistance to Ukraine. It's an interdepartmental committee process. It occurs every couple of months, roughly.
Every couple of months?
That's a formal IDC process,
so,
yes.
So when you say the coordinating department, in relation to the support that is going to one of our allies, Ukraine, only meets with the other departments every couple of months?
No, that's not what I said, Senator. I said we have a formal IDC process that meets every couple of months. There are much more regular, ongoing working level discussions between relevant agencies, including this one.
When was the last time the Department of Defence updated the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet in relation to the delivery of the tanks?
So, Senator, that would have been at the last IDC process, which was, I'd have to double check on exactly when. It was within the last 2 weeks.
Okay. I might move on to that now. Yeah. So, in relation to President Zelensky's peace formula, what's the government's approach, in relation to President Zelensky's peace formula, Minister, what is the Prime Minister's approach to the 10 essential points that have been outlined by President Zelensky?
I would suggest to you, Senator, that there's a deeper discussion on Ukraine and the current negotiations, for example. would probably be best in the Foreign Affairs portfolio. I'll see if Mr Kang can outline anything. The Prime Minister's made clear his views and his continued support and the government's continued support for Ukraine against Russia's immoral and illegal war that has been waged contrary to the UN Charter. And that's why we continue to support Ukraine, both in substantively, but also diplomatically.
Thanks, Senator. Yes, I would just mention that the government has consistently pursued two key objectives in relation to the war. Firstly, supporting Ukraine to achieve comprehensive, just and lasting peace on its terms. And secondly, holding Russia accountable for its actions. And the Prime Minister has stated that very publicly, including in relation, obviously, to the 3rd anniversary of the invasion today. And it was a sentiment that he also shared in his phone call with President Zelensky earlier this month.
Has President Trump's recent statements and actions altered Australia's practical approach to supporting Ukraine?
So, Senator, our approach is based on supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and in support of those two objectives that I just mentioned. As you'd appreciate, Senator, discussions around the potential resolution of the war are ongoing and evolving.
So Minister, has our strategy changed at all following President Trump's comments?
Again, Senator, it would be better if these were in my portfolio. Just hang on. My portfolio for these discussions, but you would have seen from the Prime Minister, and the Deputy Prime Minister's joint statement today, and the Prime Minister's comments over the weekend and prior to that Australia's position in relation to Ukraine has not changed.
Has China made any representations to Australia about Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
Sorry, Senator, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Has China made representations to us?
Well, have they spoken? Has China raised the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in whatever sense with the government of Australia?
I have publicly said, and again, this should be in defence estimates, but in foreign affairs estimates. But I'll answer it here because I'm generous. I have publicly said on more than one occasion that we call on China to use its relationship with Russia and its status as a P5 member to end the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine.
Are you able to update the committee on steps that the government has taken in relation to the support of China, North Korea and Iran for Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
I mean, this is really something that should be dealt with in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
But it is also something that the Prime Minister...
Senator, you can't just make everything a PM&C matter because you decide that the Prime Minister has to respond to you on it. This is actually Senate estimates. Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister has been consistent in his support for Ukraine, and we have engaged, he is engaged at his level with others about that support and concern about not only any support for Russia by other parties, but also the government's made its concerns very clear about the involvement of the DPRK.
So has the Prime Minister spoken to the Foreign Minister, you,
regularly,
in relation to the North Korean, the Iranian and the Chinese support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, the Foreign Minister doesn't disclose conversations she has with the Prime Minister. I'm sure Ms Bishop didn't either, and nor would I recall Senator Payne saying she wouldn't disclose that. But I can say that our clear public position and our clear position is we support Ukraine. Our position has not changed. We continue to stand by Ukraine. And that we have expressed publicly, and you would anticipate privately, therefore, concerns about other support for Russia, including the involvement of the DPRK.
Has Australia identified all Russian assets in Australia that are subject...
It's a matter for the sanctions part of DFAT, not for PM&C.
Well, I'm going to...
You can't make something that is not in... No, Senator, I'm just really good.
I hadn't even got to the comma, and you got in.
Senator, you're asking a question again. We've spent all afternoon. I note that the opposition have not yet asked a single question on cost of living. Not one question all day on cost of living. Not one.
Based on what we've heard
So 20 to 6 on and shows you what sort of priority they have on cost of living. So everyone can notice that. But apart from the fact there's been not one question on cost of living from the opposition, I would say to you, Senator, you continue to ask questions which are not within the administrative orders for this department. I have sought to be helpful. But if you're going to ask questions about sanctions, can you please come on Thursday and we will answer them?
So I'll start again. Has Australia identified all Russian assets in Australia that are subject to sanctions, and is Prime Minister and Cabinet coordinating this activity?
Yes, you.
Senator, to repeat what Minister Wong has said previously, that's a matter best put to the sanctions area within Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. They are the people who will have the level of detail, the context and the ability to provide an accurate answer. They're also the department that's accountable for that particular activity.
Is Prime Minister and Cabinet involved?
Any which way, did you have a conversation one time about this? And we're going to ask you a question here. Look, seriously, Senator, these are serious matters. I'm very happy to make sure that officers both in AGD and DFAT can answer your questions on this. But these are not the officers responsible for Australia's sanctions regime. It's the wrong portfolio.
So what you're saying is that Prime Minister
No,
and
I
Cabinet
don't
has
say. I'm
no...
not saying that. I'm not saying that they are not. I'm saying they're not responsible within government.
Does Prime Minister and Cabinet have a role for the coordination of the sanctions that are imposed upon Russian assets in Australia?
I'm responsible. I'm the responsible minister for sanctions.
I'm asking whether the Prime Minister
I'm the
and
responsible minister for sanctions.
You might be the responsible minister, but that is not the question.
No, but it's just, I don't understand why it is you don't want to actually ask questions of the people who can give you answers.
Because we're in Prime Minister and Cabinet, and these
so you've got nothing else
questions
to answer.
are directed to
if you don't have anything else to ask,
what
let's
the
move
Department
on.
of Prime Minister and Cabinet are doing, or alternatively, the knowledge of the Prime Minister.
Well,
based on today, there's not a
Senator,
knowledge.
based on today, I think
Prime Minister and Cabinet are doing, quite
well,
frankly.
Senator, based on today, it's clear that you want to ask this department questions on programs and issues that they're not responsible for in order to try and make political points. I think everyone can see that. And you haven't asked a single question on cost of living. Everyone
Because
can see where your priorities are.
Because you only discovered cost of
Senator,
living after the
I have
voice
tried to be
referendum went
of
down.
assistance. I'm very happy to answer questions about Russian sanctions. We have just imposed the largest set of sanctions that Australia has imposed since February 2022. Well, Senator, if you're not interested in why we've done that and how we've done that and how those are framed...
in a different committee. You're only here representing the Prime Minister,
Senator,
not as
I'm very
yourself.
happy to answer them.
Which is what you told me this morning. I'm
very
confused
happy
now.
to answer them in the appropriate portfolio. The sanctions are the responsibility of the Minister and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Then why are you answering the questions now?
Because I'm trying to get you to get to something that we can actually deal with, rather than dealing with something that is actually not this department's responsibility.
It's not our fault that questions keep getting taken on notice.
No, it's not my fault that you don't ask the questions in the right committee, Senator.
No, that is not correct.
You know, that is your responsibility, not mine.
Is the Prime Cabinet the lead on Ukraine or not? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a very good question. Does Prime Minister and Cabinet have the lead on Ukraine?
Senator, we have the policy coordination role.
Oh, apparently not.
Within the government, and we exercise that role through the regular meetings at Band 2 level and also the IDCs.
So we can ask questions in relation to Ukraine and the government's response to Ukraine because of them. So what I want to know is the Prime Minister and Cabinet coordinating any activity, or what activity is the Prime Minister and Cabinet coordinating in relation to the sanctions on Russian assets in Australia? What is the role of Prime Minister and Cabinet in relation to that issue?
Our role is just to keep informed as to the actions undertaken by other portfolios and to assist when there are coordination matters that need attention. But as the Minister said, portfolio ministers have responsibility for the implementation of policy in their portfolios, and they carry those things out.
In response to recommendation 7 of the Senate inquiry report, it was into our support to Ukraine. The Prime Minister and Cabinet, who I presume drafted this, said under Australian sanctions law, Russian assets can be frozen. However, asset seizure is not provided under legislation. Any proposal to seize assets through the sanctions framework would raise complex legal and policy issues. Are you able to expand on why that seems to be a problem?
Again, Senator, I suspect that's probably a matter for DFAT and or potentially Attorney General's Department, given the raising of legal issues. I do believe that it's more appropriate that those questions get put to those relevant departments where they'll have the experts available to answer those questions in detail.
So we're able to seize assets that are deemed to be the proceeds of crime and assets related to terrorism offences. Does Prime Minister and Cabinet, sorry, not who you, a Minister, what is the Prime Minister's view in relation to the seizing of Russian assets in Australia and whether he will be instructing the government to proceed with changes to any relevant legislation?
Well, Senator, I think that's a tactic we've seen for a long time today, which is you just put a proposition, ask what the Prime Minister's opinion is on it, as if that somehow makes it relevant to these Senate estimates. It doesn't. The Prime Minister's position on Ukraine is clear. We stand up with Ukraine. I'd refer you to the statement released today on the anniversary of the illegal invasion. In relation to the sanctions framework and how that is implemented and any proposed changes to it, which is what your question goes to, that is legislation and a set of legal responsibilities that resides with the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Affairs portfolio. So we're happy to answer those questions, including in relation to that report. It may be that the asset point that you raise would be something that the Attorney General's Department would be able to provide information on. Certainly, I can tell you that Senate reports we take seriously. The responses are considered across government, across portfolios.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cash.
Thank you. Could I just turn to a cost of living issue? I wouldn't laugh, Senator Wong, because it's a cost of living issue that's
it was just
not playing out well for you in Western Australia.
It was just
and that is, of course, destroying the lives of many sheep farmers who relied on exporting their sheep. So for them, I'll be honest with you, not a laughing matter. In fact, the last time I met with a group of farmers, they cried.
Senator, please don't verbal me and misrepresent
I'm not
me.
verbal you.
Let me
you
finish.
Have been saying,
let me finish.
Why is
let
the coalition
finish.
not
Oh, my
asking
goodness.
questions on the cost of living?
Senator,
I am delighting you
Chair,
now by asking some
Chair,
questions.
can I just ask for some protection, please?
Oh, please.
Senator.
I need protection.
You of all people.
Senator
I need
Wong,
protection.
You of all people.
Thank you.
Senator Cash.
Senator,
please come to order.
please, I laughed at the fact that 5 minutes after I pointed out that you had not asked a single cost of living question, you then said, I'm now asking a cost of living question. That is what I was laughing at. I'm not laughing at anybody's distress. So please do not verbal me and suggest that I am, because it is really dishonest to do so. You have a question about the ending of the
Live sheep export
Thank you.
industry.
Can you just wait for a minute? I'll just get the correct officers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think Ms Williams can respond briefly.
Thank you, Ms Williams. What conversations did the Prime Minister or his office have with counterparts in Kuwait, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates prior to the Albanese government's decision to introduce the legislation to ban live sheep exports?
Senator, we may not have the right people at the table. If you could just give me a second.
No, that's not a problem at all, Ms Williams.
Senator, my recollection, this is going back some time, was that that engagement was undertaken not by the Prime Minister but by the then Minister for Agriculture. But I will check that.
Sorry, Senator, I don't have anything further to add. I'm not aware of specific conversations on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Minister Wong, could I just confirm, because I wouldn't want to verbal you, your understanding or your recollection...
My recollection is, yes.
...is that the Prime Minister or his office would have had the conversations with his counterparts in Kuwait, Qatar or the UAE?
No, my recollection is that the live export market, the engagement with the countries which are the export markets was undertaken in part at least by the Minister for Agriculture, but I will, the then Minister for Agriculture, but I will take that on notice.
Thank you very much. If the conversations were not had Prime Minister to Prime Minister level, could you also take on notice why not?
Well, Senator, I understand again, consistent with the approach that you and your colleagues have taken all day, that you pose a range of questions about what the Prime Minister has or hasn't done or has thought or hasn't thought or what his opinion is in an attempt to make everything that government does his responsibility. The Prime Minister expects his ministers to do their job and he trusts his ministers to do their job. I understand the position you have in relation to the phase-out of live sheep exports. I would make the point that this was an election commitment. I would also make the point that the government has put in place a transition package or an assistance package and given a substantial amount of notice as to the transition out of live exports. That is obviously being led by the Agriculture Department.
Perhaps, Senator Wong, instead of taking offence every time we ask a question about what the Prime Minister did or did not do, you could actually simply answer the question, he did not have any conversations with his counterparts.
Well, I've taken that on notice. I'm simply saying, because I'm trying to be helpful, I think it is relevant, the engagement with export markets and the discussion with them before or as part of implementing this decision. And my recollection is that the then Minister for Agriculture engaged in those consultations, but I will take that on notice and check that.
How many times has the Prime Minister visited Western Australia and met with members of the live sheep export industry?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice. We don't have that information in front of us here today.
Are you aware of any times that he has come to Western Australia and met with members of the live sheep export industry?
As I said, Senator, I don't have that information with me here today.
Minister Wong, are you aware of whether or not the Prime Minister, or on how many times the Prime Minister in all of his visits to Western Australia has met with members of the live sheep export industry?
No, I'll certainly take that on notice, Senator.
My understanding is 0. Is that true?
I've just taken the question on notice.
On the 5th of February, the WA Farmers Group Keep the Sheep released a letter addressed to the Prime Minister urging him to reverse the phase-out of live sheep exports. The letter itself points out that WA farmers are suffering, with the sheep flock declining by 25% last year, 2 major abattoirs closing and the wool production at its lowest level since the 1920s. Meanwhile, shearers are reporting their businesses have dropped by 30% in the last 12 months. The letter explains that these outcomes are because, and I quote, a viable WA sheep industry needs competition from 3 markets: meat processing, wool production and live exports. The letter goes on to say, and I quote, good governments do not shut down industries that support regional businesses and communities, no matter how small you consider them, for political purposes. Please do the right thing for WA, repeal the ban, listen to farmers that feed and clothe Australia and the world. Minister, can I ask, are there any circumstances that the Albanese Labor government would reverse or reconsider its decision to shut down the live sheep export trade?
Well, Senator, I will take that on notice. Again, I'd note this is a matter that has been dealt with in the agriculture portfolio.
I'm just asking from the Prime Minister's perspective, though. The letter was to the Prime Minister, specifically pleading with him on behalf of WA farmers, basically, whose livelihoods are being destroyed. So again, I ask...
Do you have I haven't seen this letter, but do you have a response to the letter as well?
A response? No.
All right. Well, why don't if I can see the letter, I will chase up the response to the letter.
But again, could I ask you from a governmental perspective, are there any circumstances that the Albanese Labor government
You've asked
would
that and I've
reverse
answered that.
or reconsider? So in other words, no, it's a real shame. Senator McGrath has some further questions.
We are due to break for dinner. We were hoping we would make it through your brackets of questioning before the dinner break, as you indicated tentatively before. I understand that Minister Wong has an engagement outside the building.
We've got further questions, so we'll have to come back after the dinner break.
That's fine. I wonder if, given there are agencies afterwards, if you want to tell us who you don't want, which
I
agencies...
think we'll talk to the committee and...
And I also raised with your colleague, I'm obviously just a little time constrained, so if you want to come back for me, I'd ask that we start a little later.
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
No, I said that was fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will resume at what, 15:15? What?
Well, what's going to suit Senator Wong?
Yeah. What time? Let's suspend now, and I will notify.
Let's just have a chat. Yep.
Yeah.